Good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi, tout le monde. I would like to thank all of my colleagues who are joining me for this important announcement today. MPs Saray, Ben Dian, Minister Blair, Mr. Hutchings, and of course my Parliamentary Secretary Pam Demoff, all of whom, along with all of the members of our caucus and indeed parliamentarians who have been contributing to this important announcement. We're here today because this is a government that does what it takes to keep Canadians safe, to keep kids safe when they're at school, worshippers when they are in their place of worship, families in a park or on a playground, to keep Canadians safe from gun violence. But today is not happening in isolation. It's a milestone on a long and winding road. Our government has done more than any other to protect Canadians from gun violence. 3 years ago today, this government banned 1,500 assault-style firearms. We made an unambiguous statement that AR-15 style guns designed for the battlefield have no place in our communities. Last spring, our government introduced Bill C-21, Canada's most significant gun control legislation in a generation. This historic bill implements a national freeze on handguns. It takes aim at organized crime and addresses the alarming role of firearms in domestic violence. These are historic steps, and today we're strengthening them. Over the past number of months, we've worked hard to engage Canadians from all walks of life about how we can do more to protect our communities from gun violence. I've spoken to survivors of countless tragedies. These are hard conversations. These are people who've experienced unimaginable grief and loss. But through that loss, we've gained the opportunity to take further action. We owe it to them to do more, to do better, to take action now. I also want to take a moment to say that I've met with hunters and trappers and First Nations, Inuit and Métis, and rural and northern residents right across the land. I've had the chance to take a trip in the Overland Dawson Trail, spend time in Hooselkay and Northwest Territories, go out to Eskasoni in Nova Scotia, and spend time with business owners in my colleague Tim Lewis's riding in Kitchener. And each and every one of these conversations has been meaningful. The lived experiences that they have conveyed to me, conveyed to our caucus members, has informed the work that we are doing in Bill C-21 and the package of reforms that I'm going to outline in just a moment. But the point that I want to make is that our government understands that hunting isn't just a pastime. It's a tradition passed down from one generation to the next. I want to be clear that our government is not targeting hunters and law-abiding gun owners. What we're doing with our legislation in Bill C-21 is protecting families. We're protecting our children. We're protecting our communities. And that's why we're focused on strengthening the work that we have done in banning AR-15 assault-style firearms. We've worked closely with parliamentarians, and again, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary efforts of the folks who are with me here today, our Liberal caucus, and a majority of parliamentarians. The Liberal tent is a big one, and I'm proud of the diversity within it. Folks who are here with me today, they represent all corners of the country. So today, I'm proud to announce a package of reforms that will strengthen both Bill C-21 and Canada's ban on AR-15 assault-style firearms. It includes amendments to the bill that will be brought forward by Liberal members, and it will also include upcoming changes that will strengthen our gun control laws. These reforms are about keeping AR-15 assault-style firearms off of our streets while at the same time respecting gun owners. Significantly, the amendments will include a standard technical definition which contain the physical characteristics of an assault-style firearm. This definition, which would apply going forward, would be inserted into the criminal code. It provides the clarity that gun owners and industry leaders need and the protection that advocates have long called for. I want to remind you of something. In the last election, the Conservative Party pledged to get rid of our ban on assault-style firearms. These amendments will ensure that any future government will have a very, very difficult time making assault-style firearms legal again. And this is what we owe to Canadians. Furthermore, the action we are going to take through regulation will take the burden away from gun owners and make manufacturers responsible for classifying their firearms, because they too have a responsibility in keeping our communities safe. And all of these steps align with the recommendations of the Mass Casualty Commission's final report. We're also going to crack down on ghost guns. These amendments will make it a criminal offense to make an illegal ghost gun either by buying firearm parts or by using 3D technology. Now, of course, there's more work to be done. That's why we will be reconstituting the Canadian Firearms Advisory Committee to provide expert, nonpartisan advice to the government on how we classify firearms. With a diverse membership, the Advisory Committee will be charged with making independent recommendations about the classification of existing guns in the market. It will include voices from rural and northern communities, Indigenous peoples, industry leaders, law enforcement, and gun control advocates, and more. Guided by the committee's recommendation, we will increase the classification of firearms or ban them through an order in Council, just as we did in 2020. This committee will be convened quickly and asked to provide its advice to the government as soon as this summer. It will depoliticize the process and allow us to cut through misinformation and disinformation and help us to build a strong consensus about how we can move forward. Finally, these changes reflect and respect the rights of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Nothing in this package, and in particular the technical definition around assault-style firearms, will in any way infringe upon the rights of Indigenous peoples under Section 35 of the Charter. This is an historic step, one which acknowledges the realities of our current situation. It is the best path forward in this Parliament so we can advance Bill C-21 and deliver the most significant legislation on gun control and reducing gun violence in a generation. Let's remember what's at stake here. Codifying our handgun ban, enacting protections for survivors of domestic, and more. And we must get this passed. We must save lives. No single initiative can tackle the challenge of gun violence alone. This is why Bill C-21 is one of the 3 key pillars of our plan. Last Friday, we announced 4 agreements between the RCMP, CBSA, and their American counterparts, which will combat the smuggling and trafficking of guns across our shared border. This means more joint investigations, better technology to go after ghost guns, and more tracing of illegal guns. Secondly, we're advancing strong gun control legislation. And this is headlined by Bill C-21, and it also includes upcoming changes to our bail system. And finally, strong prevention strategies. This is headlined by our $250 million Building Safer Communities Fund, which takes aim at the root causes by supporting local initiatives to help young people make good choices and stop gun violence before it starts. And we're also investing in communities through the National Crime Prevention Strategy, the Guns and Gangs Violence Action Fund, and more, and I will say more about that in the very near term. We're the government that has done the most to address gun violence in a generation, and we're not going to stop here. But there are those who would like us to. Following this announcement, you're probably going to hear from members of the Conservative Party who want to do nothing but stand in the way and obstruct the progress that we are endeavoring to make right now. They took advantage of some of the concerns expressed by gun owners by hyping up disinformation and misinformation. And just last week, the special interests of the gun lobby and the Conservatives have been open in calling for the complete and total repeal of Bill C-21, which would be wrong. We want to protect Canadians from gun violence. They want to make AR-15 style firearms legal again. We want to work and are working with a broad coalition of advocates and partners, and the Conservatives want to work with the special interest gun lobby. We support historic investments in crime prevention and border security, and the Conservatives have repeatedly voted against those investments. We have concrete solutions and a strong plan. All they've got are slogans. That's not good enough for Canadians. The Conservatives' only real achievement on gun control was cutting hundreds of millions of dollars from border security, violence prevention, and more. They talk tough, but the Conservatives cut deeper when it comes to putting in place the resources and the legislation and the prevention that we need to protect Canadians from gun violence. As I conclude today, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who has contributed to this effort. The members of the caucus who are with us here today, especially the members of the Standing Committee on Public Safety, as coordinated by Pam Damoff, the Parliamentary Secretary, my colleagues in Cabinet, obviously Ministers Blair and Minister Hutchings, who have brought the voices and perspectives of rural and Indigenous communities. We have the chair of our rural caucus here, Sophie Chatel, Steph Lazon, Talib, Brenda, this entire team, and all of the members of our caucus, and the vast majority of parliamentarians, including our colleagues across the aisle, are focused to get this bill passed, including supporting the reforms that I have outlined today. We want to do that, yes, because it represents smart and effective and strong gun control legislation, but most importantly, because it will help to save the lives of more Canadians from gun violence. And we owe it to every single person who has lost a loved one, whose loved one has been injured and traumatized, to this scourge on our society to get this done. And that is precisely what we are focused on doing. Thank you.
My reading of this is it leaves out the 480-odd guns that the government wanted to ban last November. Why was it a good idea to ban those guns then, but not now?
The first thing I want to say is that today we are going to take a significant and concrete step to strengthen the definition of AR-15 style firearms that is based on the language and the recommendation of the Mass Casualty Commission. It's not just the Commission that is recommending that we take this step. It is the vast majority of Canadians. It is the vast majority of consultations that we have had with law enforcement, with victims and survivors, as well as with other groups as well. With regards to the existing market, there are three things that the government is doing to be vigilant on this issue. First, the order in council from 2020, which we introduced 3 years ago, which started with 1,500 banned models, which is now up to 2,000 models, will continue to apply. Second, the technical definition, which we will pass as part of Bill C-21, will further strengthen that ban. And third, as you heard me say in my remarks, the government will act quickly and decisively on large capacity magazines, which are the essential ingredient to turn a gun into a mass shooter. So we are very vigilant, very proactive in taking the steps that are necessary to strengthen our work against assault-style firearms.
Those extra 500 you just alluded to, are they now banned like the 1,500 that were banned in May 2020?
Those lists are not coming back, but we are striking the advisory committee to take a look at all of the firearms and to give us advice on that, and most importantly, all of the other things which I've highlighted that we're going to do.
Is the SKS banned under your new amendment?
The first thing I want to say is that the SKS will not be banned as it stands, but that's why we are creating an advisory committee, and an advisory committee that will be made up of experts from a wide array of backgrounds. And the point that I would make is this. We've seen too many deaths as a result of assault-style firearms, AR-15-style firearms. And where we are taking this today is further than any government has gone in the past. We reached out across the country. We looked at the final report of the Mass Commission, and we took a look very carefully at the language. And by focusing on the physical characteristics of firearms, we believe we will take the concrete action that is necessary to strengthen that definition, but we're not stopping there. The other thing that we are going to do is also take action against large capacity magazines, which can be fed into a gun and turn it into a mass shooter. So by doing these things together, we're taking a comprehensive approach.
Will you address, Police-Souvient is expected to denounce this, as are other gun control groups, that the Prime Minister explicitly made a promise to finally act on their demands. So what happened?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I get that this is a very difficult and emotional subject matter, not only for Police-Souvient, but for all victims and survivors. And the relationship that not only me, but the folks that you see here, I also want to highlight Rachel Ben-Dayan, who's from Montreal, has always been based on respect, always. And it will continue to be. But what we have put forward is a package of reforms that are very strong, that reflects a strong consensus not only of 3 of the 4 major parties in this minority parliament, but the vast majority of Canadians, including experts from the Mass Casualty Commission final report. So we will always have an open door. I have remained in very close contact with all of the victims and survivors groups, because I know how important it is and how much encouragement they have given us. And they continue to be an inspiration to push this government to do the types of reforms that we are doing right now. But this is a strong, strong package, and we will save lives with it.
Why did you need the NDP? Why was it, the appearance seems to be that the government watered down these amendments to ensure that you had both the support of the Bloc and the NDP. Why was it so important for the government to have both of those parties supporting when you only need one to get it passed through the House?
Well, I will say 2 things in response to that. Perhaps most importantly, the substance and the language of the proposals that we have put forward is informed by experts, including the Mass Casualty Commission final report. It is also informed by the vast majority of partners with whom we have been consulting. But more than that, and as important as protecting communities is, what Canadians expect, what families and workers and communities expect of our government, is that we make this parliament work, that we work as much as possible with our colleagues across the aisle. And that's what the team behind here has been doing. That's what I've been doing, is trying to reach across the partisan aisle to take the toxicity and the polarization and the disinformation out of a debate and a dialogue that has frankly gone off the rails because of one party. And yes, it's important, Marika, that you ask questions about perhaps some of the minor variations between where we stand and where the Bloc and the NDP stand on gun control. Those are fair questions. But the bigger and more important question is, why is it that the only thing that the Conservatives want to do is make AR-15s legal again? And in that regard, they stand alone and in isolation in a corner of this House of Commons that does not reflect where the vast majority of Canadians are. And we're going to meet Canadians in this moment and get this bill passed with the cooperation of opposition parties.
In order to have political cover from the NDP and Bloc to get this through?
The short answer is no. And the reason I'm confident in saying that is because we have drawn inspiration from experts, independent, non-political, bodies like the Mass Casualty Commission final report, why we have taken the advice of law enforcement who support the ban on assault-style firearms, why we have worked with victims and survivors groups. And I would point out that many of the proposals that have been put forward today are informed directly by the suggestions and the recommendations that they have made. The proposal that deals with protecting Indigenous rights was informed by the work not only that we're doing in government, but by our conversations with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. That's what Canadians expect. They expect to do this work.
You appear to be blaming the Conservatives for a mistake that your government made, which is failing to consult any of these groups or any of these people the first time. So I'm wondering if you can address that, and why did it take this sort of national crisis, as it were, for you to arrive at this particular set of amendments to the legislation? Why didn't it happen 6 months ago?
The first and most important thing that I would say to you, Steph, is, look, no one here has any regrets about pushing gun control legislation that will save lives. And it's hard, and it's emotional, and it has been pulled into polarizing and toxic and sometimes overtly violent and criminal expression, not only online, but in our communities. The people with whom we do this work, they're afraid. They're petrified. And the Conservatives have to own up to their part of the responsibility in feeding into that. And as far as policy is concerned, they missed the mark. They called the other day before committee, I was just at committee last week, you know what they called the national ban on assault-style firearms? Virtue signaling. That is shameful, disrespectful. And they owe every single person who has been impacted by this kind of a gun that was designed for a battlefield, an apology. But they won't do that. They won't do that because they're in lockstep with the special interests who form the gun lobby. And the fundamental question that we have right now before us is, do we want stronger gun controls that will take AR-15s out of our communities, or do we want weaker gun controls that could make them legal again? And that is the sharp contrast between the vision that the Conservative Party offers and what the Liberal Party
What is
has.
stopping people from going out and stockpiling the guns that you wanted to ban last November but aren't covered now because of this?
We're going to take concrete and decisive action. We're doing that through Bill C-21. We're doing that through the buyback program, where just last week we announced an agreement with businesses to purchase back 11,000 of the first AR-15 style guns to get them out of our communities once and for all. We're doing it with the reforms that we're introducing today, strengthening the definition of the assault-style firearm, taking additional action against ghost guns, making sure that we bring manufacturers along to play their role and responsibility in the classification of the guns. And this is one of the three pillars that our government has in tackling gun violence: strong laws, strong borders, and strong prevention. That's how we're going to save more lives. And that's exactly what this government and everybody that is here is dedicated to. Merci beaucoup.